Hello and welcome to your recap of the EPT European Weekly number 128. If you enjoy the format or have any feedback, please let me know in the comments below, as this is a new series that I'm still kind of on a test run for. The big selling point of this EPT Weekly was that we got to see 7 brand new maps that are going to be entering the ladder map pool. Not only that, but with DreamHack Valencia 1 week away, this is our first peek and seeing at what players are going to be playing on each one of these maps with the current meta. The early round matches proceeded as expected, with some interesting play on Moondance, where there is an in-base natural that players took advantage of. If you're interested in PvP though, there was a very fun round of 64 match between Disc and Naji in a PvP on Data C. It was a match where Disc really should have been dead early on, but pulled off some spectacular micro and just really good decision making to actually pull that game back. Honestly, a pretty fun watch. After that, Disc went on to face off versus the European Protoss player DNS in a really fun PvP. It was fun to see how DNS went for a late game Skytoss army with carriers and such, whereas Disc went for the much more mobile force, and it really did play to the fun of the map and seeing how players were expanding closer into each other on opposite sides of the map. At the end of the day though, Disc could never contend with that Skytoss army, and DNS claimed game number 1. Game number 2 on Cosmic Sapphire was a lot less interesting, with DNS taking the victory with just solid macro play that kind of outperformed Disc. DNS went on to face off versus the American hero Neeb in the round of 16. Game 1 was on the map Inside and Out, and Neeb did a really great abuse of the natural expansion, having this weird warp-in point for Dark Templar. He secured a nice advantage, ended up taking the game with a really nice charge lot timing attack against DNS. Game 2 on Cosmic Sapphire was looking pretty one-sided for Neeb, but it turned into this weird base trade and some kind of questionable decisions being made by DNS, but Neeb was already ahead and was able to secure a victory with a 2-0 to move on to the round of 8. In the meanwhile, Lambo and Special finished off their matches versus Goblin and Gerald respectively to advance on to the round of 8 and faced off against each other in a pretty cool series. Game 1 was played out on Data C, which was clearly a fan favorite for pro players at this point. Special opened up with a lot of really cool aggression, but man, Lambo just did such a great job defending, deflecting everything left and right. This game overall just felt like a really fun, super high level, action-packed game. 13 and a half minutes into the chaos though, the entire game swings heavily in Lambo's favor after Special attacks into some lurkers and takes some pretty devastating losses. Game 2 we headed on to Moondance, but didn't really get to see a lot of the features on this map because Lambo went for a roach all-in, and Special simply did not see it coming and just outright died. Somewhat disappointing end for the series, but a 2-0 put him in the semifinals to face off versus Clem. Clem was coming in as a favorite, not only as just one of the top players in Europe, but also as the previous week's European Weekly champion. Game 1 started on, yep, you guessed it, Data C. Clem and Lambo were having a very back and forth game, where Lambo did manage to get a nice early lead initially, but Clem started bouncing back over time with just constant aggression. The game became really weird because Data C is a map that really allows you to expand easily and get up new bases. But both of these players were so strapped for cash because they were hitting each other in the face so often, and neither one of them could really keep up their 5th or 6th bases. There finally came one engagement where Clem was able to snipe off a base, whereas Lambo was not able to with his ultra transition, and Clem started seizing a lot more momentum that closed out game number 1 in his favor. Map number 2 went to Moondance, and interestingly, Lambo did the exact same thing he did to Special on this exact same map. He went for the roach all-in. Clem spots out the attack earlier on than Special did, and manages to barely hold on, but does take a lot of damage in the process. Lambo identifies that he has a second potential for a kill move, and decides to go for a second round of the Roach Ravager all-in. Despite the fact that this second attack catches Clem very off guard, Clem somehow manages to hold on with really great micro and positioning and takes a pretty substantial lead heading into the rest of the game. Lambo decides that it's time for a third round of the Roach Ravager all-in, this time a little bit later on. It's at this point that I have to alert the Zerg players in the audience to avert your eyes if you don't like watching as roaches get massacred by siege tanks. Clem holds with, frankly, a much smaller army, but just siege tanks obliterating roaches in mass. Quite enjoyable to watch as a Protoss player, if I do say so myself. And Clem secures himself a 2-0 victory over Lambo to move on to the grand finals. The other side of the bracket was a little bit delayed, so moving back into the round of 8, Neeb was finishing up his series versus Max Pax, and they played a game 3 on Stargazers. And let me tell you guys something, this was insanity. This was just absolute craziness. Both players opened up with Stargate. They were both just letting each other's workers all get absolutely massacred again. And somehow, in the very end, Max Pax ended up coming out victorious. MaxPax went on to face off versus a Laser in the semi-finals, who had just beaten both Hero Marine and Skillous, already making this quite an impressive run for him. On map 1, we went to Cosmic Sapphire yet again, and it does seem like it's going to be a recurring trend of Protoss players really enjoying going for Sky Toss on this map. The other recurring trend that I noticed within this game is that a 5th base ended up being pretty difficult for MaxPax to secure, as a Laser was finding every way in the book between bailing run-bys and ultra run-bys to constantly shut down MaxPax's economy. But despite all the economic damage he did, at the very end, MaxPax just had this moment of realization where he said, to hell with the economies, I'm just gonna go kill you, and he did. Game 2, we headed on to Tropical Sacrifice, and a Laser fired back, showing that you can still in fact win versus Protoss players by pulling the Queens. All you need is a Drop Overlord and a Layer Tech to drop out some creep for those transfuses. Game 3 went to Data C, which of course it did. MaxPax went for a 2-base all-in with Resonating Glaives and 6 gateways, but a Laser somehow managed to survive. Survive is kind of a relative term because he took a lot of damage in the process, but somehow he managed to stabilize. MaxPax decided to follow it up with a Disruptor drop to complement all of the Adepts, and with some really juicy Disruptor hits, he ended up taking the 2-1 and advanced on to face off versus Clem in the Grand Finals. Okay, let's get it out of the way. Game number 1, Data C. Data C is where MaxPax ends up going for a Phoenix Oracle opening, and Clem goes for a big Marine Siege Tank push. MaxPax does a great job with the charge, finishing up right in the nick of time. He gets a great defense, ends up getting really far ahead, and secures a victory a little bit later on the game. Pretty straightforward. Game 2 goes to Moondance, where Clem hits a really sick 2 Cyclone, handful of Marines, stim timing, and kills MaxPax, as he only has 2 gateways available and a bunch of gateways in production alongside charge. MaxPax falls over and Clem puts a 1 on the board. Game 3 went to Inside and Out, and MaxPax looked like he wanted to try and abuse how great of a Blink Stalker map this should have been. But a few missed micro moments from MaxPax and some fantastic defensive play from Clem puts Clem radically far ahead in this game. And it seemed like it was Clem's game to win until Dark Templar happened. Clem loses the game because he is just super unprepared for these Dark Templar that run in. He has no scan energy available, falls radically far behind, and MaxPax cleans up. With MaxPax 1 game away from winning the entire weekly, Clem decides to go to Tropical Sacrifice and brings back the 2 Cyclone, handful of Marine timing attack. With the power of Shield Battery overcharge and some better positioning, MaxPax actually holds on in this game though, and carries it out to going to Phoenix Colossus late game. Both players kept poking and prodding, but Clem was the one that won out in the end, where he consistently was able to shut down the 4th base attempts from MaxPax. It did seem like getting a 4th base on this map ended up being kind of difficult here for MaxPax. But that brought Clem back into the series and took us to a game number 5 with a tied up series score of 2-2. We head into the last map we have not seen so far, Waterfall. This map is a bit crazy and can best be described as a wide open space. And MaxPax decided, well, the best way to take advantage of that is to go for another one of those big Blink Stalker attacks. Clem anticipates this though and gets a bunker in his main at the perfect spot to counteract the Blink Stalker attacks from MaxPax. MaxPax was at death's door, and it seemed like Clem was going to get a 2nd victory in a row for the EPT European Weekly. But somehow, MaxPax finds High Templars in a War Prism that get one of the juiciest storms I have seen in a while. MaxPax goes on the counteroffensive with an evened up game and finds a opportune moment where he gets up into the natural where Clem is not really ready for him. MaxPax ends up defending his opponent's natural with storms and great positioning, and ends up taking the series 3-2 on that final map, crowning him the winner of the European Weekly. And that wraps up our recap for the EPT European Weekly number 128. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed it, do consider following the channel, subscribing, all that good stuff. And of course, big thank you to Eric the Man 10 for supporting me on Ko-Fi. I'm also going to be out next week, so there's no recap, as I'm going to be at DreamHack Valencia commentating the event. Hope to see you guys watching in the live stream, and I'll see you guys there. Cheers.